Good morning, everyone. Again, from St. Gallen. It's morning here. A warm welcome to my favorite week of the year, our Diversity and Inclusion Week. It's our 9th edition. As you have seen, we are already planning our 10th anniversary next year. A big thank you first to the project team, to Aida German and Nina Herr, who are in charge of the whole week and the whole coordination. Also, of course, to all the contributors, to the students who support us. And a big thank you also to Giulio Brina. He will be the moderator of the week. So I will only do today's morning moderation and introduction, and then he will take over for the next intro sessions. He is also our technical support. If you have any problems, do not hesitate to write him. Our topic of this year is how to navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion and well-being in the workplace today. Just preliminary information for you. You will get all the presentations and the recordings in a few weeks. They are available on our website. And if you want to use the translation, we have here simultaneous translation from English to German, and then in the next session from German to English. You see here the button where you can use it. We have tested it, it should work. If there are any problems, please write to Giulio. So, a quick overview of the program. We start today. I will start in a few minutes by introducing Caroline Creven Fourrier for an introduction talk. Thanks a lot, Caroline, that you take the time to share your insights here with us. And then we have a first online session together with Sebastian Kubik from Bühler on the topic whether women-only programs still make sense and are useful in today's world. And then in the afternoon, you will hear Jamie Clore and Eugenia Bachemestre on the topic of menstruation, maternity, and menopause. And then also a company insight by Aurelia Adamo and Seraina Wüst on We Take Care, Promoting Diversity, Strengthening Health. I do hope to see a lot of you tomorrow at our on-site day in St. Gallen. We have different workshops there, 2 sessions, also a keynote by Rolf Becker on talent or background, education and careers in Switzerland. So a longitudinal study, very interesting. And then the other days, a lot of more food for thought for you, online sessions where you can choose where to attend. This week would not be possible without our sponsors, so a big thank you to all our sponsors who made it possible again that also in this turbulent time we can have a great program and a big exchange also tomorrow. We expect close to 180 participants tomorrow. It's really great. So now let's start. The topic of the whole week is how to navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion and well-being in the workplace today. And as you all have realized since several months now, the topic of diversity, inclusion, or fairness, health, belonging have rarely been discussed as controversially as in the recent months. So despite the existence of clear empirical evidence, emotionally charged topics frequently encounter difficulties. And we want to focus today in our opening talk on how do companies deal with all these challenges, especially the global ones, but also, of course, the local ones, Where do they hold on to values? Which topics, for example, remain or are pushed into the background? And also how to convince and especially communicate in these challenging times, internally and externally. And as already mentioned, it's a great pleasure to have Caroline Creven Fourrier with me today. Caroline is currently the Group Chief Inclusion and Belonging Officer at Roche. She has a very rich experience journey in different positions over more than 15 years and is very passionate about embedding inclusion and belonging into organizations as a foundation of good business and a rewarding culture. A warm welcome, Caroline, from my side, that you take the time to give us some insights on how Roche especially reacted to the challenges of the last month. So I will start with my first question for you. We decided to have it in a kind of an interview format. Can you, Caroline, briefly explain what makes you so passionate about these topics and how you ended up in your current role? Because I have a hypothesis here. I think the most influential diversity, equity, and inclusion officers are those who previously held line manager roles.
Thanks a lot, Gudrun, and it's really my pleasure to be here with you all today, and I'll be following the whole week actually as well. So to answer your question, first the passion element. My passion is people and potential. And I know from managing teams, so back to your hypothesis of being people leaders and business leaders. So I know from that particular experience that if we don't create the right environment for people, they may actually never reach or even recognize their own full potential. And in a business context, that potential is about innovation. It's about performance. It's about retention of talents. And ultimately, it does have a big impact on the bottom line for organizations. And so in life, that potential is about realizing what makes you happy and finding your own purpose. And the reality is that making small changes in organizations can actually have a tangible impact on this. And irrelevant of the setting, irrelevant of the industry you're working in, when people feel valued and when people feel comfortable being themselves, their potential rises to the surface.
Caroline, can you maybe give a small example of
yes,
change?
Yes, absolutely. So if I take an example from many years back, I was in a different organization. I was living in Asia, actually at that time. And I was in a role that was a regional role where you had people from different cultures. Indian colleagues, Japanese colleagues, Chinese colleagues, Australian colleagues, and understanding what was the cultural context for each of them. Understanding that, making sure that their colleagues understood that as well, and having open conversation about this is my culture, this is what we value, this is what I feel comfortable in, actually helped create bonds in this particular team. And what we really saw is that while this team was made of very high performers individually, they weren't until that moment able to necessarily work well together. And once we acknowledged and celebrated the uniqueness of each of those individuals in the team and the culture they came from and what they valued, then we started seeing them really connecting better together. So the connectedness element, the collaboration element, that really, really rised to the surface. And the potential of each individual was then seen and valued. So a really, really concrete example there.
Thank you very much. As far as I know, Caroline, Roche Group has adjusted its inclusion and belonging strategy lately. Could you explain why this was done and which aspects especially were kept?
Mm-hmm.
Which aspects, were changed?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe if I zoom out outside of Roche specifically, in every organization, inclusion and belonging functions, whatever the name inclusion and belonging or others, in global organizations have always had to operate in regulated landscapes. It means that, for instance, in France, the landscape when it comes to inclusion and belonging or to DE&I would be different to, let's say, Switzerland, to Japan, to the US. So this is really down to geographical and cultural norms and differing compliance expectations based on different geographies. And so this year, if we go to 2025 specifically, in January, we actually we were informed of additional regulatory requirements specifically in the US. And for any organization such as Roche and others that has a strong presence in the US, then you need to pause and ask yourself, how much is that market representing in terms of workforce and our business? Are we government contractors? So what is the impact of those regulations for our business? And it is therefore critical that, as in any other country, companies remain compliant so that companies maintain the license to operate. And in the case of Roche, it's really to ensure that we can continue serving our patients in that particular country. And therefore, in close collaboration with our colleagues in legal, with our colleagues in the business, we did make some adjustments to ensure that compliance. And so those adjustments, for instance, include adjusting what is measured and how we report. This meant, as you might have heard in the press, removing representation goals in our case, and adapting an increased local regional approach to execution. You might hear some organization talking about global, making sure that you have a global direction and strategy and values, but that you have a local execution and implementation to make sure that in each different countries you will adjust your approach to ensure compliance, but also to ensure maximum business impact. And so some of those other changes that we spoke about was still under, so with the understanding that there are some things that we want to maintain. So we just mentioned some of those changes, but some elements that we do not want to see changing are, for instance, the importance of employee resource groups or ERGs. Those are vital to ensuring that any people in the organization, whatever company, feels that they belong. And so that's very important that we maintain such a focus. Also ensuring that we create that sense of belonging and that we create an environment where people feel comfortable being themselves. And that means encouraging people to share their different viewpoints and the diverse perspectives, And this is a driver for innovation, actually, to have people disagreeing in the room, looking at things from different perspectives, for instance.
Yeah. So if I got you right, you say this kind of adaptation we always had in the field. If you operate as a global company, you have some guidelines or visions in a global sense, and then you always adapt to the local requirements. And the change here in the US was massive, so you had to adopt. And one of the main things you mentioned was that you do not measure anymore or do not communicate, because I think that's different. Do you still measure representation and not communicating, or do you don't measure anymore?
We do have measurement requirements in some countries, and so we communicate where appropriate.
Yeah. Oh, great. What values are still core to Roche, and which topics? So if we look more to the topics remain,
yeah,
and what was pushed back in the background.
Yeah, and I like that you ask about the values, because in times of change, organizations' culture is and remains anchored in the values, and this is what really steadies the ship, if we can speak this way, and that has been the case this year for many organizations, including Roche, to really anchor back into their values. So in the case of Roche, our values are integrity, courage, and passion. And having our values as the backbone of our strategy, business strategy, inclusion and belonging strategy, is a constant.
Okay.
In terms of what has been pushed to the background to your question, so the representation goals being removed has, as I'm sure you can imagine, had the biggest impact from this perspective. That said, at an operational level, global measurement moved to inclusion and belonging, which has naturally meant adapting how we execute our strategy. So here we go again into global versus local and specific country requirements. And it also represents a pronounced geographical difference when you consider reporting requirements in Europe, for example, but also as a global organization, how that can differ from Middle East, from Japan, or in the case of the changes earlier this year in the US.
So measuring inclusion is differently compared to measuring representation. So I know from my field that you have anonymized HR data to measure representation. Measuring inclusion needs surveys, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you are now measuring inclusion as well.
We were already. So our focus on inclusion and belonging is not new. It's not something that started this year. So we already had that. And absolutely to your point, there are mechanisms in companies such as Roche to collect those data to understand how our population internally feels when it comes to inclusion. Do they feel included? Do they feel they belong? And we are able to then look at those data from different, so to analyze the data from different viewpoints, be it geographical, be it others, and that is collected if on an annual basis, if not more, internally.
Great. So I think one very, very important topic is communication when times get insecure and shaky. So how do you manage this internally and externally? Have you established kind of new rules, framings, or new wordings you are using now? Can you give us maybe some examples?
Yeah, and I agree with your starting comment. Open communication is extremely important. I would say in the case of inclusion and belonging, or DE&I, it has always been something very important, regardless of the current changes we face this year. And so we have continued to be transparent and we try to be really timely in our communication, particularly this year. But that was already the case. So the approach has not changed. We were particularly mindful of what is going on internally, externally, and so when is it that we would need to communicate with our people. And in that sense, I would say the communication probably increased across the organization, and especially in specific areas or for specific audiences, such as our employee resource groups. We were talking about those people earlier, and I was sharing we see them as really being very core to creating that inclusive and organization and that sense of belonging. So we are particularly mindful of engaging with them and providing timely communication, and also to our leadership and management to make sure that leaders feel comfortable talking about those topics and that we do not end up with a situation where by fear of not saying the right thing, you don't say anything anymore, which is always something that is kind of looming when you have change, so change management, regardless of the topic.
Yeah.
And so that's really the way that we approach this year.
How do you think will the topic change in the coming years?
I think it will continue to change first. I think change is probably the new norm in that sense. So we will continue to see a shift in this area. Certainly in the medium term, with more local to local approaches being adopted, making sure that we emphasize again that country focus. What are the country requirements? What is the country culture? And beyond standards and regulation, what is expected culturally in some geographies? I would also say the need for resilience and agility to meet those regulatory requirements will continue. So I would say the change and what it requires in terms of our soft skills, that will continue. And this will mean shorter strategic timelines and forecasts. I could envision. I don't see that we will continue to have strategies over 5 years or 3 years when you can see that the environment is shifting sometimes month by month, if not even shorter timelines there. And while I deeply, deeply believe that inclusion and belonging will remain a business priority, we are talking about a type of strategic adaptability that may become the new norm. And from a global perspective, we may see inclusion and belonging and DE&I moving toward more holistic model with generations, disability, accessibility, or well-being being the focus areas. And if we look also at the more technological trends, AI, I can see play a very big role and bigger role in the future. So it will be interesting to see how all of that unfolds.
Yeah, definitely. And yes, maybe also one question on technology. Are you already using AI in your inclusion and belonging strategy?
So we are starting to include AI in specifically inclusion and belonging. We are on a very ambitious and exciting journey at Roche overall when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we're under that umbrella, under that overall business umbrella with AI. Inclusion and belonging is also understanding what it means, how we use it, training ourselves as a team to make sure that we can yield the best benefit from that technology.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. I will open up now for questions from the audience. We have a few minutes left. So let's quickly have a look at the chat. So I don't see any question in the chat. Is there any question in the audience? Please just open your mic and pose your question.
Hi, Caroline. It's Deborah Croft from Thriving Talent. Lovely to hear you, and Gudrun, thank you. Completely agree with the evolution of what we're seeing and how it's becoming more under well-being and employee experience. I love the fact that Roche is still actively championing and sponsoring ERGs. So just really curious, what does that look like at Roche? Because there's a lot of ERG fatigue where, people give their time and energy in top of their day jobs to support ERGs, to be that voice and vehicle for change. And often they get a bit frustrated. So what does that look like at Roche? How do you actively engage? How do you champion and get real leaders behind the ERGs?
Thanks for your question, Debbie. Nice to see you here. So there are multiple ways in the way we engage with ERGs. So first, I guess like in quite a number of organizations, we have ERGs that can be at a global level and some that are at a country level, so that we have, again, this global approach, so global direction on a particular topic, and a reality of local cultural expectation and legislation. And so we really are staying very close to those groups to understand what is it that they are doing, what are their plans. I meet with them regularly. So every quarter or so, I would have meetings with those individual groups so that they also feel, one person in my team says, feels the love. And I like that she says it this way, but so that they can really see the connection with our strategic intents. So that's a way to also keep them close on engage, and that they can see really truly where they are contributing for the organization. So that's one area. Another one is so for instance, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago in Switzerland, where we have our HQ, so a very large population, and so quite large number of ERGs as well. We had our impact network, so we call them impact network. So impact network Switzerland Summit, where we actually, for a whole day, welcomed the leaders of those groups alongside some of our management. And the idea was really to have this encounter between the two, so that, again, the ERGs can see how they are contributing to the business, and the business can actually see how they can get positive contribution from those groups, and that it really creates this emulation, this positive dynamic. So it's not to say, Debbie, that indeed in that time of change we don't see some fatigue. There is this constant challenge structurally that those groups are doing this on top of their day job. So it's a reality. What we are trying to do is to leverage our recognition systems, and different organizations have different systems. We have one that is through our intranet. You can nominate people, they get points give them access to some gifts or rewards, and it is public, so it gives a public recognition and the tangible recognition. But I know other organizations have other systems, but what is in it is really saying thank you, saying to those people, we see you, we value you, and we are grateful for what you're helping us do.
Thank you very much for this question, Deborah. We have to stop here because the next session starts in a minute. Thanks a lot again, Caroline, for taking the time, giving us some insights into your current journey and your ideas how the topic will evolve in the future.